So I want to dive in and talk about a little bit, just shift gears, because I know we may have a little time crunch out at a certain time. How you found the world of chiropractic care, how you
Well,
got
that's a fun
started, your
story.
journey into it. Yeah.
August 25th, 1994, I got hit by a car on a bicycle. I broke my hip, broke my shoulder, split open my face. You see that nice scar there?
Hmm.
And I found myself laying in bed for 6 weeks, like peeing in a bedpan, that kind of
Mm.
fun stuff. Hooked on Percocets and really was not
Mm.
doing well. And my mom's friend was starting to date a chiropractor. And she said, "Hey, you need to go see my friend Bill." And I was like, "Chiropractor?" Like, I had no idea about chiropractic or understanding of it at all. So I went to this guy on a Saturday morning. He took an x ray this way, he took an x ray this way, and then he took one from the top of my head. And I'm like, what is this all about? Right. And then he walks in the room, starts drawing lines all over the place. He says, "Turn on your right side," walks up to me, boom, hits my neck and walks out of the room. I'm like, what was that? I had no idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I end up going home, turning on a college football game. Next thing I know, I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. This was like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Now it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sleeping on a couch in my mom's house. And I said to her, "Hey, why'd you let me sleep in my clothes?" She goes, "That's the first time you've slept
Mm.
in 6 weeks without Percocet." That was
Mm.
a wake up call. Went back, got adjusted again on Monday. Guy puts me on my side, slams my neck, boom, walks out of the room. I'm like, what the hell was that? Didn't
Wow.
explain anything to me. I have no idea. I said, next time I come in on Wednesday, and I'm following what the lawyer wants me to do because I had an accident.
Mm-hmm.
I walk in and he goes to adjust me. I said, "No, you need to tell me what you're doing." He goes, "I don't got time. I got patients to go." I said, "Listen, I need to know what you're doing to me. Every time I go home, I fall asleep for like 12 to 16 hours. He says to
Mm.
me, "Good, that means your body's healing." That was the first time I even
Mm.
heard the word healing and understood it, besides pills and potions and lotions. I grew up with a grandfather who was a pharmacist, and that's a whole nother
Mm.
story.
Oh, wow.
And like, with that world, I I was raised in the medicine world. My sister
Mm-hmm.
was antibiotics to death. The poor girl had ear infections as a kid. Had she gone to a chiropractor, she probably never had those ear infections. Long story short, that's how I got to chiropractic, became a chiropractor. And then in the end of my chiropractic schooling, I learned about this technique called network spinal analysis
Mm.
under a guy named Dr. Donald Epstein. And it was more of an emotional release technique. And I
Mm.
was starting to learn about guys like Bruce Lipton, and I was starting to see people like Dr. Joe Dispenza was showing up at campus. I actually saw these guys before they were famous,
Wow. I know
and they
your
were
story
talking.
reminds me of Dr. Joe's a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is kind of similar, and then in 2000, let's see, I guess it was 2006, 2007. My daughter gets run over by a car.
Wow.
It's her pelvis. Thank you, God, she didn't die. She
Mhm.
should have been. In all intents and purposes, a miracle took place. She had a small fracture in her pelvis, and she had a Lexus SUV on her body, her over, not once but twice. I don't want to get into too much of the details, but within 5 years of her having this, she started getting like OCD type symptoms. And we started looking at different ways to help her, and one of them was through neurofeedback.
Mm.
It happened to be, and also I was looking to find some sort of modality for my practice, but here it was. God put this in my hands, and started doing neurofeedback. Then I started really getting into the idea of trauma in the body. Vanderkart wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And then there was
Right.
another book, Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. And
Mm.
all these different people were coming out and starting to talk about trauma and how it impacts our body, it impacts our brain. As a chiropractor, I knew that when I would adjust people, like, I can get them out of pain, but the emotional pain would still be there.
Mm.
And I can get them out of pain, and I can help them, walk better. All this is great stuff, but on a level, to a certain level, I can go. And when we were in chiropractic school, they promised you the world. They said chiropractic can heal anything, which, a nervous system free of interference is going to be a lot better than one that's interfered. But miracles, I saw miracles, but nothing like I was promised. But when I started doing neurofeedback, when I started doing network spinal analysis, I started to see miracles,
Mm.
miracles. And then, you start to look at other functions, people walking in, and I noticed every patient of mine is walking in with a thyroid problem.
Mm.
All these women are on Synthroid. And I'm like, this is weird. And so, when I started going to neurofeedback seminars, they're talking about Well, you might want to take this to another level. You might want to learn some functional medicine.
Mm.
So we started looking into functional medicine. And I can go into so many different topics right now.
Yeah, no, I love that it's like a holistic approach to healing,
Right. Well,
like mind,
I,
body, spirit,
first of
energetic.
all, I have a big rule. If I can get someone off drugs, that's a win. That's
Mm.
like, some people feel good when they win the Super Bowl. Some people feel good when they win an Oscar or a Tony. I'm not going to win any awards for what I do, but I win awards by changing people's lives. And I
Mm.
don't change people's lives. Let me just be straight with this. I get to move bones and I get to watch people utilize the technology we use, but their body heals themselves. And there's a power within us. We have to first acknowledge there's a healing power within all of us. We call this inborn
Mhm.
intelligence, innate. I'll call it God, whatever you want to call it. That intelligence is what tells every cell in your body what to do, from your brain down to your every cell in your body, right? You have an afferent and efferent nerve that goes from and to the body, from the brain to the cells. So when trauma gets caught in our body and it gets stuck in our body, it causes all kinds of other issues. Like the brain starts to think it's under attack, or a fight or flight response. You start to see the amygdala will get caught up in, that's the reptilian brain. And what happens with the reptilian brain is that we see that a person will get feeling like they're always in a fight or flight response. So, and I see this all the time in my practice. You'll see people come in here, they think it's anxiety. It is anxiety symptoms, but really what's happening is their brain is in a fight or flight
Mm.
response and they can't get out of it, right?
Mhm.
And so what things can you do? Well, there's so many different approaches. Breathing is one. Yoga is such a strong place to start. Why? Because once we start to breathe and we activate the phrenic nerve, what ends up happening is, and the vagus nerve, we start to calm the body down. And that's a temporary thing until then trauma kicks back in.
Mm.
Now, trauma, there are three types of trauma. We have chemical trauma, we have emotional trauma, we have physical trauma.
Mhm.
Physical trauma will be like stored in the repair of the body. So we see that. That's easy to fix, physical trauma. As long as it's not gone too far gone, the body heals itself that way.
Mhm.
Chemical trauma, we change the body's chemistry through nutrition, through supplementation, through detox. That's one way to get rid of chemical trauma. But emotional trauma is one that doesn't go away so quick and so easily. And
Mm.
there's a reason. Emotional trauma sticks around because of the story we keep telling
Mhm.
ourselves.
Mhm.
So I like psychotherapy. I think it's important, but I don't think psychotherapy is the only thing you can do to get rid of
Right.
trauma. I think psychotherapy
I
is
agree.
really good to get rid of the story, to change the
Yeah.
story, or to accept the story.
Mhm.
That trauma is still in the body. You get used to that
Yeah.
trauma.
For sure. Like, I remember, like, okay, had done so much, like, reframing or rewriting of the narratives that I had told myself, but then there was still the element until I learned, like, the different emotional release techniques or, like, different things to move it out of my body. I didn't know. I was like, "Why am I still, like, having some of these, symptoms or something?" And so it's really interesting too. I didn't even look at trauma as, like, those 3 separate entities or, categories, so I like how you broke that down.
But one of the therapies that I've seen great results in
Mhm.
is it's a somatic respiratory integration type of technology. It's called
Mm.
core energetics. And
Mm.
so when an emotion comes up, you go beat the pants off of something and you get it out of your body. You work it out to the point
Yeah.
until you cry it out, scream it out, yell it
Yeah.
out, and get it out.
Yeah. I mean, I just the other day, yesterday, I did a breathwork session because I'm doing this like 30-day challenge thing.
Mhm.
And I did a breathwork and all of a sudden I just like started crying. And it was, I feel like it was connected to recent grief, but I don't have to know the story. It was just the release of some kind of pent
Well,
up.
what if I tell you that grief doesn't matter where it comes from? It might not even
Yeah.
be yours in the
I don't have
first
to
place.
know. Yeah. Yeah.
It
Oh,
might be your mom's. It might be your grandmother's. It could be your grandfather's. See, here's the thing. I don't know if you know the famous study that was done in epigenetics back around 2010. They took rats and they love the smell of cherry blossoms. And what they did was they started to give these rats, every time they come near cherry blossoms, an electric shock. Right.
mm,
Eventually, the rats don't want to go near the electricity or the shock or the smell. So it creates a trauma. And they can measure the stress response in the rat every time it smells the cherry blossoms. Now
wow.
they breed these rats after they don't go near cherry blossoms anymore. 2, 3 generations, 5 generations down. And what they do then is they see that the rats, their grandchildren, great grandchildren, also detect trauma
Wow.
when they smell the cherry blossoms. So immediately causing anxiety. So there was an old
Mm.
saying in the Bible that said, hey, the sins of your fathers will be passed for generations. This is very common. I work in New York, and I've worked with a lot of uh, Hasidic Jews and people who are Holocaust survivors of 2, 3 generations.
Mm.
And these people have trauma and real trauma in their bodies, not because I think so, because their brain maps say so, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when we start to look at all these things that happen to people, it's an accumulation, like an onion, right? You have physical trauma, you've had car accidents, you've fallen, you've broken bones, you've done things physically trauma. Emotional trauma goes into anything, even misconceptions of things you think were real might not even be real.
Mhm.
And they say that the most traumatic thing, something at the age of 4 or 5 years of age, that's when we start to see trauma hit us, when we wake up out of the dream state of being a child. And we wake up to the world's not a safe place and that we're not as good as we thought we were. Something in that little voice starts to kick in our head, that reptilian voice that keeps
Mhm.
kicking in to say, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. All these things that kick
Mhm.
in. And now you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to heal this.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting. Yeah, I read something. I mean, I don't know if it was in The Body Keeps the Score or some other one about how, yeah, I'm an egg in my mom while she's in the stomach of my grandmother.
Right.
So I'm like, and then how many does that go back?
But even still, the
Mhm.
DNA gets programmed,
Mhm.
right? So programming our DNA is being programmed from the person who gave us birth. You're getting
Mhm.
your mom's DNA and your dad's DNA.
Mhm.
Now, unfortunately, their DNA, and you can change DNA. So let's be understanding of something also. You're not a fixed condition. Right? If that was the case, if you had DNA that said you would have a heart disease and you took care of yourself and you exercised and you ate right, the probability of heart disease is not going to happen. You might be prone to it,
Mhm.
but you most likely can prevent it. A lot of the things that we get sick from are preventable. We're not impacted by our genes, from what I understand. And there's all kinds of studies out there. Like there's a guy named Dr. Joe McCord, who, in the world of free radical biology, he was a genius. He created some products that actually slow down the aging process, right? That
Mm.
actually stop aging in our body. Aging is just free radicals wrapping around our DNA and destroying our DNA. So we can utilize certain nutrients and herbs to heal the brain and heal the body as well. And a lot of people think supplements are the answer. There's a lot of bad research out there about supplements.
And then also, if you don't test for what you're deficient in, like how are you just
Right.
guessing or random? Oh, I read that this is good. Let me take some of this.
Well, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize toxicity of too much vitamins also in the
Mm.
body. Like we can put too much something in our body and cause problems. That there's something that we don't. And on top of that, half these vitamin companies, they're fraudulent, right?
Mm.
They're not monitored. So the FDA does not watch and see what they put in this stuff. So they could put sawdust in there and tell you it's 500 milligrams of vitamin C. You take it thinking you're getting 500 milligrams of vitamin C. You're not getting 500 milligrams of vitamin C.
Mhm.
Consumer Reports did a whole thing around vitamins and showed that most vitamin companies do not put in what they say they do. And I'm going to say this: vitamins are adding to our bodies what we don't have in our food. The truth is, the majority of the food we eat, if you're eating healthy, you'll get the majority of stuff. You're not going to get vitamin D. You need to supplement with that. Sunlight's your best thing, but unfortunately, there are minerals that we're depleted in, electrolytes. The more you exercise, so simple things like table
Yeah.
salt not table salt, I'm sorry, like ocean salt, sea salt
Yeah.
can be really good for you.
I started putting Celtic salt in my coffee.
In your coffee, that's
Because
an
it's
interesting.
so good because it just gives it well, I use like a little stevia chocolate drop, a little Celtic sea salt, and then kind of
Well,
make this like
well, that's good because
savory
coffee
sweet thing.
depletes that stuff right out of your body, so it's a perfect mix.
I'm
As it
like,
goes in, it goes out. That's a great idea.